You are listening to Shameless Stories, and I'm Nicola Humber, founder of the Unbound Press, soul-led publishing company for magical women writing world-changing books. And we are delighted to be the sponsor of this podcast. So enjoy, magical one.
Welcome to another episode of Shameless Stories, the podcast that aims to lift the lid on shame and all that it means, everything that that comes up around that word, that emotion. And today I'm really excited to introduce to you my latest guest, Holly. Hello, Holly.
Hello.
Hello. Holly is a career coach and an author, but we were just talking about, before we came online, how we don't really enjoy labels because sometimes they do come steeped in shame, right? It's like, I think anything external comes steeped in shame. I'd love to dive into we started pulling on that thread. So yeah, let's talk about the book, permission slips, your feelings around shame. And I'm going to stop talking because I tend to have this, I just don't know when to stop. So
I love that.
And I'm shamelessly owning that. So over to you, Holly. It's so lovely to have you, by the way.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I was really excited about your podcast because shame is such a through line in my work. So I'm a career coach and I've just brought out a book with a bunch of amazing life coaches, 5 of us. And it's all about feeling our emotions, permission to feel our emotions. And shame is often the reason why we don't. And kind of my definition of shame is shame arises where any emotion doesn't have a witness. And it's kind of like we've all been through moments in life where we feel something and we're in this environment that's not mirroring it back to us and almost acting like, it's not real. And we begin to question ourselves. And that's where shame gets formed, I think. Oh, that's my non-technical definition.
Yeah, but I can feel that because it is all. I mean, that's something that I've explored. Is that it's actually we form the awkward silences. You kind of create a story around why there is an awkward silence, right? And shame is often at the root of it, or you've messed up or whatever. Like it is often an external. It's an external thing that's made us feel that internally. We then internalize that feeling, right? And that equals shame.
Yeah. And I think shame was a big part of my life, and it particularly showed up in my work life. And I think this ties in with the labels things a little bit because, I have so many labels. I sometimes don't know which ones to pick for where. And none of them quite describe me. They're what I do. I think if I'm describing myself, I much prefer to lead with my values and be like, I really love innovation. I'm a bit techie, but I love emotions, which I know is a paradox. And my mission in life is really supporting people to find their power especially when we're in stories of disempowerment, which has been my journey as well.
Sure. Can we dive a little bit into that journey? Do you feel comfortable enough to share?
Go for it. There's so much in the book that's personal, so there's not much left to hide.
So tell me about the first, or you mentioned a lot of the shame has come up in your career or around labels. So what does that look like? How did that manifest?
So 2 ways come to mind. One is when we introduce ourselves with our job title, people make a whole host of assumptions and biases about us. So when I used to be an engineer, it's one of my labels, everyone would be like, oh, you must be really brainy. And I'd get all this positive feedback and status, right? And I'd feel brilliant about myself. My career has always been with people and innovation and blending it with tech. And So when I moved away from engineering, there was a lot of shame from family, because I was kind of like, I'm just an engineer. I feel like I've got more to give. I didn't know what that was at the time. I think so many of us feel that sense of potential that wants to make a difference somewhere, and we're looking for where it can fit. And this, I've come to learn, is not just my story, but it's a collective story that is both conveyed in media and government policy, but also within families. And particularly, I was a first in family to go to university, and one of the most common shame stories around that is feeling not good enough and not worthy, and not often feeling stupid because you don't know what you don't know yet. You kind of go into this alien environment where people talk about 2-1s and you don't even know what that means, and everyone else seems to get things, and we internalize so much shame, and it carries on into our careers as we progress as well, or sometimes blocks us.
Yeah, I mean, like, I still don't know what a 2-1 is, to be fair. It's just to throw that one out there. But I hear what you're saying. Like, it often does stem from experiences at school, or like you say, the label thing. It's so interesting that you're talking about that, because I mean, in my PR membership, the thing that people really struggle with is narrowing it down. Like, how do I describe myself? Well, I'm all of the things. And it's like, well, why do you have to just be one thing? Why can't you, for this particular audience, you're an engineer, for that audience, you're a mother, for that audience, you're wild witch in the woods, I mean, all of those roles, things,
right?
Well, yeah, there's so many, all of those things are true, but they're going to resonate with different audiences. And I think that's the issue that we have with this labeling, pigeonholing, whatever. And actually, it's a really interesting one to kind of unravel, because obviously in my line of work, I have to teach people to summarize their 45 years of experience into like a paragraph, and it's really bloody hard to do because people don't know who they truly are. And gosh, like, it's just so, I love it though, because I guess if like pulling on the other label piece, like, there's people that have been diagnosed with ADHD, or they are perimenopausal. They're all other labels. But I guess there's an element of, well, if I know that I'm going through this, that then means it's okay to behave in that way. Or does that make sense? I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. As you've probably gathered, we do this a lot on this
I love
podcast.
A tangent.
But it's kind of that, so like, I don't know, it's really interesting. I'm loving this.
For me in response,
one
is, if somebody is looking to narrow themselves down, there's more interesting ways to do it, right? One of my favorite exercises with people is to say, think about your 3 favorite projects, whether that's personal, work life, any area of life, and ask yourself 7 times why you liked them. And when you get to that 7th one, look for the golden thread between all 3 of those. So if I did this when I was 26 and trying to figure out where I fitted in the world. And my answers were, oh my gosh, I really love working with people, and I like to talk a lot, and I need to do that quite often. Otherwise, my energy gets stifled and I feel icky, And
so is that what the next step was, from engineer to the next?
So my career path was, I was an engineer. I'd done a lot of work supporting young people, getting people into careers they may never have aspired to, working with young people in high schools during that and before that. And it was always there. But I was an engineer, and I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, this thread's been here all this time waiting for me to notice it. So I needed a bridge from, I knew I wanted to go into something people people, training, coaching, but I didn't want to go and retrain because I didn't know if I'd enjoy it yet. So I took a stepping stone and thought, well, I've got an engineering degree. What kind of companies in that world offer training and who would hire me? And found an amazing company who do sustainability standards, and went and taught people how to build more, construct more sustainably for a while. And then from there,
that's amazing.
Training academies, and then broke out on my own eventually. And I've been a yoga teacher. I've done so much, which is why I think it's, lots of people come to me and they say, I've done so many things. I feel like I'm good at so many things, but they finding that red or golden thread between it all is the really powerful bit. So mine is helping people step into their power and believe in themselves. And to do that, we often have to dive into processing emotions that we haven't been able to hold and bring love to. And I think it's in the book that we've written together, me and we called ourselves the Courageous Hearts Collective because we needed one name for the book. But we wrote it because we were all finding that we had clients who were showing up with issues that kind of weren't about purpose and meaning and weren't about strategy and practical stuff. It was this something else, this something they needed to process. And it's not, a lot of people are like, isn't that counselling? And lots of people have definitions around those things, but really it's just in the moment what's showing up. And being able to hold space for that. And, where I couldn't hold space for some of my emotions, if that showed up in a session with a client, I'd almost invalidate it without meaning to or realizing that that's what I was doing. So I did this deep dive into expanding my own emotional range so that I could feel more emotions and feel them more intensely, so that I could be okay with that, with when others showed up with it and not freak out. How many times does someone cry or something happen and we're like, oh, that's a sign of something that we need to kind of feel into a little bit more.
Oh, I love that. That's really juicy because like you say, the thing that I don't know, there's probably an element of shame around this, my story, in that when I shifted to being more of a freelancer and working directly with amazing people, I felt like I was getting all the benefits of the client. So I was working with life coaches, I was working with spiritual teachers, authors, you name it. And there was a part of me that was like, I shouldn't be learning from these people. Like, I'm siphoning off like their amazing wisdom. Like, I should be paying. Do you know what I mean? There was a bit of shame and guilt around that, in that, like you were saying, like, bring those emotions that were coming up when you're in client situations. And I had to make peace with that as well, because at the end of the day, like, there is always an exchange of energy. I feel like when you're in a situation like this, I'm learning from you, maybe you're learning from me. I never like to assume that, but it's one of those things where it's reciprocal, and it feels lovely when you're actually bringing in your expertise and you're helping. So, you come in with expertise and you kind of plug a gap that somebody else can't plug themselves, if you know what I mean. So I feel like your work is so powerful like that, from what you're saying. Like, you're giving people permission to find, even if they're trying everything, you're giving them permission to, like, really pull on the thing that really matters to them. And what, we often can't see the wood for the trees when we're doing it ourselves. I mean, I know that from my own work, and sometimes we need that mirror, and I feel like that's what you provide. Is that a fair?
Try to. There's probably still edges.
There's always edges. And there's no shame in that either, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And isn't it, I don't know if you found this, but I often find that if there's something I need a lesson in, it shows up in a client, right?
Oh my God. Yes. Yes. And that's okay too, right? Like the lessons are all around us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think coming back to the shame point and kind of labels, you know, the difference when I say to people I'm a career coach, everyone has a negative, or many people have a negative picture or experience in their mind around that, because it's something that's been done quite poorly, I would say, in our country for many years.
Oh yeah.
Its value hasn't yet been realised. And I think as a profession, you know, potentially it's got things to learn still. You know, it's a profession where a lot of the theories and methods that you're taught are based on white male cohorts who were fairly rich in America during the 50s and 60s, you know, and what's emerging, which is amazing in that world right now, is all of these counter views from much more broad and diverse experiences. And I think we're all still learning about
But I think that, you know, again, like pulling on the title career coach, if I think back to my own experience with, like you were saying, you were helping young people find jobs and encourage them into jobs. I think we're really shocking at that in this country, like just pulling on that, because I remember going, I mean, I write about it in my book, and I remember going to the careers advisor at sixth form college and say, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I was like 18. No idea. I knew I liked like people, and I knew I liked writing, and I knew I liked creativity, and I knew I liked history. But, you know, that's not a job in Tesco or in an office, or, you know, that, like, none of that. So she just literally narrowed it down and went, secretary, right, off you go. I was like, okay, good. That's what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And it's kind of what I followed. You know, my mum was an admin assistant. Like an admin assistant is a catch-all for dog's body, right? So I don't think we really have them so much anymore. But at the time, it was, okay, I'll be an admin assistant. That's fine. I could get to go to an office and be all busy and important, but really, you're just moving paper, which we don't have anymore.
yeah,
And
it's,
you know,
this thing of like, sorry, I've interrupted you there, but
no, it's fine.
Catch it. It's this thing of when we're asked what do we want to be when we're older, we answer it with labels, not with feelings,
100%.
and not with values. And the answers are in your feelings and your values so often. You know, emotional intelligence is as much a part of us as our mental intelligence and our body intelligence. And I think that the way that I do coaching differently in that space is I use story, and I say,
yeah,
let's get out of our work brain. Let's get out of our education brain, because how many of us have come out of the education system feeling shame over various things? I learned I can't spell, my grammar is terrible, don't do anything to do with English. And yet I loved books, and I was a really slow reader. Yeah. So I've always listened to lectures and things on audiobook, like even getting the cassettes from the library as a child, you know, back in the day. And yet at 35, I found out I'm dyslexic. Met my dad at the time and found out he's autistic. And it's like, oh, wow.
Wow. Okay.
You know, and so when we're asked to find our labels or our job titles, I think it's not very effective. I think it leads us down paths of shame, because we often feel our not enoughness and who we're not yet. Can I really say I'm this or that yet? Or I don't know if I really want to be that, but I'll give the answer because everyone else will stop asking me then, you know? We'll go through the transitions. And I think
I just pull it.
Go on.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you. You carry on.
I was just going to say, it's much more interesting to say, you know, who's been a decent person in your life that's not your mum and dad? Who have you maybe felt inspired by at the strong end of the spectrum, or thought that was a really nice person, or they did something good for me? And often the qualities of the people we admire show us what our values are. And those little stories, you know, I've had people come in and that one question has opened up so much. You know, I was bullied as a kid. This teacher came in and, you know, was a real advocate for me, and I'd love to do something in that kind of energy. And it's like, oh, well, let's look at that then, you know. And it's in those personal moments and those personal stories that we find the gold, not in the what are your grades and what are you interested in, because what we're interested in changes so often, right?
Yeah. I love that. There's such a synergy in what you do in a career situation in with regards to what I do with a visibility situation. It's kind of, we're both, we know the gold is there. It's just finding it, and it's never where you think it is. It's always, you know, in that feeling where you've had a lovely teacher, or that situation where you've had a, you know, that you took made a choice that was different to the choices that you've always made. And I want to pull on the thread that you mentioned about the dyslexia piece, and like, I know back to the labels piece, but when you found that out, did you have like an aha moment? Was there like a, oh, okay, that explains it situation? Were you able to release shame
I
around
never
stuff?
had shame around it, which is an interesting thing.
That is.
And I think this isn't a normal experience from other people who've had that label, I guess. And maybe it's because it came so late in life. When I was growing up, it wasn't really a known thing.
Yeah.
It was only just coming into schools a few years later. And for me, I always knew I thought differently. The way I knew my brain worked differently. I saw everything in pictures. If you ask me to picture something in 3D, I can do it and draw it in an instant. If you give me numbers, I'm fine. But if you give me letters, I can't connect sounds and symbols together very well. But my brain works incredibly well at connecting other things that a lot of people don't see. And I always just felt that magic, and I trusted it. And I don't know why I did. And it's led me to amazing places. So when I found out I was dyslexic, I was just kind of like, oh, that's why I had to practice my spelling so much more than everyone else. That's why, you know, languages were such a struggle for me. That's why I was a slow reader, because I was reading the book. And you know, when you have to read out loud in school, I was creating a whole movie in my mind. So that's what was slowing me down. I wasn't bothered what someone thought about my voice. I was having a great time in my own little world, you know.
I love that. That's amazing.
And I think I've often done that. I think I've often gone into that world of my own. And I often like to invite other people into it, because I think it's this mythic story world where we tap into different senses and see different perspectives on our stories.
Love that.
And as part of the emotional mastery program that I went on with Emotionally Fit Leaders, there was one prior that I'd done with them called Live Your Great Story. And in that's the idea that we can tell 3 different types of stories. They called it a victim story, an overcoming story, and a great story. My words for that, I hate the word victim, because it makes
me too.
It doesn't land in my body, right? For me, it's a pain story and a shame story. It's the things that we're scared to bring to light. And an overcoming story is when we're fighting against it or proving wrong. And like, when we're in that space, we think we're getting somewhere, and then we achieve it. And it's like, oh, we didn't quite get the response we wanted from the outside world still. You know, we don't know what to do. But when we're in our great story, which all of us are already living, we just don't always realize it. You know, we're telling this. One of my stories, as an example, was I didn't get the best grade in my degree. I really wanted to get a 2-1 or a first, which is kind of like getting an A star or an A. And I got a B. And for anyone that's old school like me and on that system. And I really felt like I'd not done good enough and I wasn't intelligent enough. And what I learned when I went and did my career coaching program was actually people who come from my background often get a 2-2, the same as me. And it's not because we're any less academically able, it's because we're working 30 hours in a bar to fund it. It's because when someone else says go and get a job, we're like, how do we do that? Nobody in my circle has ever had to really navigate the kind of spaces that I'm entering. I don't have people to just give me a little bit of a, don't write that on your CV, or, you know, don't, you don't have to talk yourself down to be truthful.
Yeah.
There's so many lessons there, you know, and
Yeah.
and I think that that lifted a lot of shame for me. Also learning that people who've been through that lived experience often feel a sense of shame from their family if they're in a very secure job, because when we're poor we crave security, and then we get the money and we're like, okay, now I'm looking for more meaning and more purpose, and all our family are like, you must be crazy to leave that great job, and why, you know, you doubt yourself and you think, oh, everyone thinks I'm mad. Some people might even say that, you know, and this is, again, really common experience where we hold this shame. And I think one of the most damaging ones that we have in news and politics around education at the moment is this idea that we are saying to young people and even to adults, if you don't get a good job and you don't earn lots of money, you're worthless. We're almost saying to them, you didn't work hard enough, you're not intelligent enough. And we're not saying it overtly, but they're the messages we pick up and carry. I think we've really got to change that in order for potential of people to really be realised, because everyone has potential.
100%. And it's funny, I was just, the last recording I just did on the podcast was a lady who also has dyslexia, which is, I find this so bizarre because this just seems to happen. Like I have a ream of people and they all have similar but different versions of events. And she was saying that, you know, what you've just described about learning the backstory, learning the fact that, you know, 2-2 is not a failure, learning that I'm going through this with my own children. They've just done the SATs. And we spent a lot of time saying to them, it's a measure of the school, not of your intelligence. And if you don't get all the answers right, it's because you haven't learned it yet, or you haven't, you know, or they need to address it differently or whatever. So, but when you're a child, it's really hard to kind of compute that. But I do feel like that sort of advice and guidance wasn't around when I was growing up, and I'm pretty sure similar situation. I guess it's an age thing that we're different generations got different levels of support and guidance. And what's really great is that you're now in this space where you can help people navigate their careers. And like you were talking about that feeling of shame, leaving a good job and moving into something new. That's exactly what I felt when I was made redundant. Well, there was a part of me that I'd heard a story from somebody who basically gave me permission to go, sod that job. Let's, you know, now is the time to leap and try something new. You know, this is, you know, he basically gave me permission. He was a guy in technology, but he quit technology and retrained as a pilot. And it was in the Grand Canyon. He told me he was flying in the Grand Canyon. He said, I bet you've been flying, you know, I bet you think I've been flying helicopters for years. And we're like, I hope so, you know. He was like, yeah, 4 years I've been doing it. I retrained. I'm in my, you know, he was in his like late 50s, late 50s. And he was like, I just I realized it was now or never. I want to do something I want to do and that I enjoy. And he said, and it's the best decision I've ever made. And hearing that story made me go, I'm not taking the job that they're offering me. I'm going to take redundancy and I'm going to start my own business. And of course, I was met with, why do you want to do that? Even like one of the guys I used to support in the business, he was like, but you're mental. You've just had children. Like, why would you leave the security of a good job and a good salary when you've got 2 small children. And actually, as it worked out brilliantly, because I was able to work. I worked to the end of the expensive nursery period, and it all coincided with the girls starting school and having access to free preschool hours. So I took a dip in salary, but it meant a better quality of life for me and the children. Yeah. And at the time I did feel a little bit of shame, completely being honest with you, but I was able to then transmute that and turn it into a business that works, that supports people. And it's a bit, it works around my family as well, which I think for me, there were the measures of success. And I think, again, that's like you say, there's something wrong with our systems, because success is all based on money, being able to read and write and do maths and pass your exams. But, true success measures really are like how you feel and how healthy you are and how healthy your family is, right? Would you agree? Am I?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a whole body of research that says having a sense of direction, purpose, calling, whatever you want to call it. I call it meaning. Some people call it mission. And kind of that sense of meaning in your life is often talked about. And most people say that they get that in work. And I think that we really undervalue quality of life. I mean, wouldn't it be much better if someone said to you, instead of, what job do you want? If they said to you, what kind of lifestyle do you want to live?
Yeah.
Why do you want that? What does it give you? Okay, you want a Ferrari. Is that because of status? Is that because you can get the hot chicks? Is it, all these different normal human things, right? And it's okay. Yeah. But be aware of why you want it and what's motivating you, because otherwise we don't own our stories and our motivations. They own us. And I think that's where I could have gone with engineering. Is I loved the status. I loved the money. It was a great company, job for life, tick, tick, tick on all the kind of mainstream success factors.
Sure.
But I felt like my soul was slowly dying. I felt like I had more to give, and I knew. I had a similar story to you. Someone kind of gave me the permission slip. There was a guy called Frank who I used to sit next to. And I came in one morning, he had his coffee and he was retired and still loved what he did. And he said to me, Holly, when you get to my age, you never regret the things you've done, only the things you never had the courage to try. And he said, you never regret the things you failed at either. It's only the things you never had the guts to do. And I knew in that moment, I'm going to make a big change here. I've got to, because I don't want to wake up with that regret. And I think that really helped me. But yeah, I think the other thing that happens in careers is we bring shame from our personal life as well. So we all have stories of being wounded and not feeling heard and seen and valid or acknowledged in some ways. And then we go into the workplace. And I used to sit in engineering and I loved watching all the stuff going on. I think, God, that person's triggered by what they've said and they're unaware of it. And that person's trying to manage them, but isn't realizing this is an emotional thing, And so I'm a big advocate for emotions in our work life. And I think that's really counterculture, because we have this stiff upper lip and a separate identity in work sometimes is still expected. And I think that's quite an old-fashioned view. I think that we're much more becoming like, I am who I am and I'll be the same person in many places now. But I think that our education system still focuses on skills and information. And I think we're about to, especially with AI emerging, I think we're about to go into a time where what will set people apart is not what you studied and what you know, because there's so much available, unless you're going to go into research or some kind of something on the cutting edge of new information.
Sure.
I think by and large, it's going to be creativity and problem solving. And like one of the people that I really admire is Maslow. Most people know him because of this triangle.
Yeah. Yeah.
but he didn't even design the triangle. That was done by a publisher. And
Right.
his story was actually, he worked with some native tribes, and he learned from them that in the West we come into the world feeling empty and not enough, and they have this real culture of enoughness. You're already enough, you've been born, you're such a gift to us. And that's where his ideas were formed. But his later work, when he got much older, he started writing a book, and he actually passed away while he was writing it, and his co-researcher kind of finished the book, and it was going back through all of his work and rewriting it for people. And he talked about, we don't know how to manage creatively.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned from writing the book, Mission Slips for Claiming Your Emotions, is the 5 of us showed up every week or two for a couple of hours, and we would always start our call with, what emotions have you felt in the last 24 to 48 hours? Is there any emotion still lingering that you want to kind of speak to? And we didn't get into story, it was just naming it and feeling it. But what that allowed us to do is to be aware of the dynamics in the space every time we met. And shame came up at times when, throughout that journey, we'd have peaks and troughs of energy. Some people were kind of ready to take their story out and promote it. Some people felt like, oh, I need to take it slower. And we gave permission for all of that, which was quite incredible. So what I've learned from that process is, if we want to collaborate and we want to have less toxic workplaces, we need to be more emotionally literate. We need to bring compassion in, and we need to understand that it has a place in business, and it has a very powerful place. If you get a really great leader, often they really get the emotions of where people will be at, and they'll speak to it, and they'll speak to their own emotions. They won't hold back the tears in a moment when they feel proud or when they feel disappointed. It's all allowed to be there. And I think work is one of these edgy places where we still get compressed and contracted.
Yeah, leaning into that vulnerability, but not doing it from a place of like a vacuous place of vulnerability, kind of that trying to curry favor vulnerability, but real life feelings. And I think that there's something around that. Like there was a whole big marketing, like you see it on social media. Oh, we need to lean into the vulnerability. Oh, we need to be, to capture our audience's attention. We need to be seen crying on camera. And that, I don't know. I've done that. I've actually, but not on purpose. I've been recording something, and then the emotions have come. And I felt shame because I knew immediately that brigade that kind of go around saying, oh, she's just fake crying. It's like, but no, it's true. Like sometimes you need to be seen in your emotions, in your shame, in the processing of those big feelings, because we don't do it enough. And like almost like, well, there's a lot of teaching around managing emotions with children, but we don't have that for grown-ups really, apart from if you go to a counselor or
and there's some paradoxes around it, right? Because you might be listening to this and thinking, oh, does that mean I have to tell everyone every emotion I'm feeling? That's not what I'm saying. It's for you. It's not for anybody else. It's for you to feel what you're feeling. Because so often, like, one of my favorite phrases is like, I get angry, and I'm like, oh, anger is a natural response to a boundary being crossed. Wow, what boundary do I need to be noticing here? The anger's here to serve me, right? And every emotion is here to serve us, but we have this idea that there's positive and negative ones. They're just neutral until you add a story to it. And so I believe that all our emotions come to serve us, and it's just learning how to interpret them, which is what we're taught, by sharing our stories. It's what we're teaching in the book. And not in a very kind of, I think a lot of books in that area are really about kind of researchers and getting into detail, and it's like, just ours is much more, we'll tell you a story and you take what you can from it. And more lived experience. We're not saying we're experts in emotions. We're saying we're humans and we all have emotions, and here's what we've learned. And I think that we actually have a whole section on shame called Permission to Feel Shame. And one of my favorite stories is Maggie, one of my co-writers. She writes a piece called Sweaty Palms, and it's about those feelings in school, right? And what happened with her. And Owen, my other co-writer, has written something about shame on you and how many times she'd heard that and what it meant to her, and how she managed that, because it was something that, you know, came up time and time again. And so, yeah, I find that there's this paradox as well with emotions, that we think there's sometimes when we tell a story, we're telling it to get the emotion heard. And when we do that, we're placing an emotional burden on other people.
Yeah.
And that's what that icky feeling is. And actually, it's when we feel it and witness it ourselves, or with someone who can hold that space with us, right? And be like, oh man, that sounds really crap. And yeah, I can totally understand why you're angry. You know, like sometimes I'll shout on my coaching calls and be like, fucking hell, you know. And it wakes us up when we let us feel it. And so by feeling our emotions, we don't put that emotional labor onto other people. It's about us recognizing, what story am I in? Am I telling a disempowering story here instead of what I was taught as a victim story? But I think it's a disempowering story.
Yeah.
Am I telling a fight story where I'm fighting against something or proving something? Or am I telling a powerful story about myself? And I think when we can find that perspective on anything that's tender and raw and vulnerable, we come across so powerful, and we connect so wonderfully with people and in relationships, and, you know, whether that's in work or at home, it all plays out.
Love that. I could listen to you all day.
Wait till we
I
get
was like, I'm like right on the edge of my seat, like, oh my God, this is like absolute gold, because it just resonates with me on every level. And like when you're saying about feeling the emotion, like it's taken me like most of my adult life to get to the point where I'm okay to just feel the emotion. Like the other day I was in the kitchen and I was angry, because again it was like there was a boundary had been crossed, and it was like I need to express this to everybody. It's not just, I wasn't angry at anyone in particular, I was just angry at the situation, and I was like, I just need to voice this. And I took myself off, came back and spoke to everyone like in the rational brain after I'd let off a bit of steam, and was like, this is why I'm angry, because this and this, and everyone, and this is how I want, you know, can we all address this together? And I was so proud of myself. I was like patting myself on the back going, oh my God, that's so grown up of me. But like me 5 years ago would have dealt with that very, very differently. And I do think that they're, you know, having these grown up conversations in workplaces as well as in our friendships and relationships. Like you say, you bring your relationship to work, you know, something's playing on your mind. It's really hard to disengage from what's going on over there and to be present over here. And, you know, that isn't something that's taught.
Yeah.
Well, it is being taught now for younger generations, but the grown-ups are still, we're the worst, some of us, like we're all still learning.
Yeah. You know, a really great practice around things like that is, if you've got something niggly going on, make a practice of just find a list of emotions on a website. There's loads of them online. You can go to my website, courageous-hearts.com, and there's one you can download, and just begin to make a note of what emotions you're feeling every day. See if you've got an emotional hangover, which is where, you know, how sometimes something riles you up and you hold on to that energy for like a week or two. But when you name it, it dissipates. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, and when you know what naming it means, when you begin to learn things like, for me, shame shows up whenever there's a grief of something that it hasn't been witnessed in me. That's a big place for me. Blame shows up so often because it's easier to feel blame than anger, and to admit that I'm really angry and I'm feeling a sense of violence towards this person. You know, like, it's really hard to admit that sometimes we want to knock someone's block off. And we all have it, you know?
Because it's not society's expectation. Like, we mustn't do things like that. But yeah, you're right.
Well, there's a difference between doing it and feeling it, right? But we
Yeah.
feel so much shame about even feeling it. And it's okay, I think, to say, you know, I've been through abuse when I was growing up, and part of the shame for me was violence. I wanted the perpetrators to die. And it wasn't that I wanted to kill them, but it was that I wanted the experience to be different for me. And because I felt this deep violence in me, I was scared that I'd hurt people as a coach, you know, and that's something I've had to work through. And I think when we don't feel those emotions, they show up in these really kind of weedy ways that kind of get us all tangled. And if you kind of get into a practice of, you know, if you do morning pages or anything like that, just list whatever comes up, and you can use a list. And eventually, once you get a bit more language, you'll find your own words.
Yeah.
But notice the emotions you don't name. That's the value of looking at a list, because we all have places that we don't like to go and feel. I said grow there, probably grow as well. But like mine was, I felt shame around naming that I felt angry, I felt violent, I felt despair, you know. They were really difficult places, and I felt like I didn't have a right to feel those. And I think so many of us go through that for very, very different reasons. But the beauty of feeling our feelings is not that we become these highly emotional beings. It's more that you get to real wisdom through it. And you mentioned your story of the guy in the helicopter. The emotion around that was joy. Yeah. And so often we allow our brains to tell us stories of, you must be secure, you must be safe, to be in this kind of poverty story and not enough story. And one of my key things is follow the joy, you know, I know it's really cheesy to say follow your bliss. Mine was joy. Joy was a place that was cringy to go to. I couldn't celebrate my strengths, who I was, you know, and we think of like negative emotions, what I would call a constricting emotion, something that feels not good, as the issue. But so many of us are afraid to feel love, or afraid to feel compassion, or show these emotions. So, you know, even the so-called positive ones are a challenging space to be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even today, like I'm working through, like I'm writing my chapter for the Shameless Stories book. And I realized that shame for me lies in pleasure and joy.
Yeah.
Like I'm almost not allowed to experience those things. Or for some reason, I created this story around, like, you can't get too excited and you can't enjoy that too much because, you know, it might get taken away, or, you know, who am I to have fun doing this thing? Like it's really interesting. I find it when you start diving into it even more, and I love to like go deep in all of this, and I could talk to you all day about this. But yeah, like what you're saying, it's just so very, very similar. And I just want to like presence that I completely resonate with what you're saying. And I am absolutely certain there will be people listening that also feel shame around, like you say, automatically people go to the negative emotions, you know, fear, anger, violence, all of those things. But like you say, the positive stuff as well, like pleasure, joy.
And it's a habit, right? It's really a habit. You know, we have to train ourselves to go to those places, and it takes a bit of time and intentional practice. You know, there's Microsoft, I think it was, did a fantastic free program for women that was all about shouting about what you're good at, because this is a common issue for women. There's so many other ones, you know, for whether it's around sexuality, race, coming from a poorer background. there's particular stories that go with each of them that keep us locked in those constricted feelings and denying our permission to actually feel fully expressed and to act from that place of wisdom and that place of acceptance of everything.
Yeah.
Almost like we're shamed out of, we're all shamed out of different emotions in different places. And I think the common stories are things like, in work, what it shows up as for a lot of people is, I'm too old to change.
Yeah.
Or if I made a wrong decision before and I haven't liked this, how do I know I won't make the same mistake again? It's work isn't meant to be enjoyed, it's meant to be endured. It's a means to an end. It's a really common story. It's
Massively common.
It's actually quite heavily embedded in our society, that one. And actually, maybe that was true at a time. But I think we're much more focused on joy now. And I think the key for anybody that's looking for their sense of purpose or for their next move is really to follow the joy and the emotions. I'll often say to people, write a list of everything that you're frustrated with right now, and then imagine what the opposite is. And it tells you what you're looking for and why you're wanting change, And so, as you can tell, I'm quite pro emotions when it comes to our work.
I love it. Oh my goodness. And thank you for that little, there's loads of little exercises that people can do to kind of figure out why they feel the way they feel. And for so long we've hidden our emotion, like you say. You're focusing on the human doing, not the human feelings. And feelings and stories are what make us human, right?
Yeah. One little story that I'll add, because I think this is really important, like part of my journey has been, I was really numb. I went in and did some counseling programs for me to deal with some of my trauma. And I remember the very first one I did, and they were saying, what emotions did you feel around your mum and dad growing up? And I couldn't come up with a single word.
Wow.
Not one. And I remember feeling like I'm failing at this thing and I'm unhelpable. Being unhelpable is a common story that traps us in the constrictive experiences as well. And so many of us feel numb. So if you feel numb, describe how numb makes you feel. That was a way out for me. But part of the reason that I didn't have words was because I grew up in an environment where emotions were never named, never discussed. So I literally didn't have the language. I had to go and get a list and be like, okay, what's the difference between, say, jealousy and envy? What's the difference between blame and shame? I didn't know it. I didn't even have the words, and then I didn't know the meanings. And I think that's so common. And I getting that emotional literacy just by the practice of naming what you think you feel. And if you feel numb, name the numbness. If you don't have to use specific words, but it does help to notice, what are you naming all the time? That's probably habitual pattern. And what are you never naming?
Yeah.
That's probably an area as well to grow. So I didn't name kind of thrill and excitement very often because that felt scary.
Yeah. Oh.
So yeah, I think people come with stories, where something happens early in their career as well. And on my website, there is actually a little bit of a kind of emotional fitness assessment, and it has a bunch of questions. It's just tick boxes. And when you look at it, you'll tick all the boxes immediately. And when you go back over it, you'll see incongruencies in things. And often behind those incongruencies is a story and an emotion that you're holding on to. So I had one amazing client who just came for one session, and they came to kind of review their emotional fitness assessment with me. And in it, she realized she'd been through some quite severe bullying and harassment in the workplace. and she'd internalized it and was blaming herself still. And that was preventing her from progressing into a more senior role in something she loved and was great at. And in one session, you know, we had the tears, we had the release, we had the new story of what it meant, and it changed everything. And that's how quickly it can happen. Because I think so often we think, oh, these things take years, and I really dislike that narrative. I'm like, it's so why does it take years? It doesn't have to. I think the emotions, learning emotions speeds it up. We can process much faster then.
I guess that's about like also realizing that if you want to make change, you can do it quickly. You don't have to wait for a rainy day or save it for best or whatever you want to call it. It's about, you know, if you want to change things, you can take action immediately to shift this stuff. You know, you feel the feels and you move through it, and you can change your narrative so quickly.
And so often it happens naturally.
Yeah.
You really feel a deep feeling, something that maybe has been held in your body for a long time. Within a couple of minutes of feeling it, you've released it and you see this new perspective. It's like a natural mechanism. You don't need to worry in your mind how to do it. And if you're really numbed out, start with where are the aches and pains and the tensions in my body, and just say, thank you. Why are you here? And often it'll tell you, and you'll get a sense of the emotion from it too.
You've left so many lovely nuggets in this podcast. Thank you for coming on today, Holly.
Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you, and have you got any final words of wisdom? So I think you shed lots. I have made notes.
So people can find my book. I've got it here, Permission Slips Between Our Emotions. It is on all retailers, like, you know, Amazon, Blackwell's, W.H. Smith, I think. There's also a digital version. But you can find links to it at our website, which is courageous-hearts.com. And that's amazing. The link to my website. In there, it will redirect to Evolving Careers, which is my careers focus. There's a whole page on that. And my last bit of wisdom is, you mentioned about feeling afraid of having challenging conversations. And I would say we're really not so good at being courageous in conversations. And this is why we came up with the word courageous. When I invited the authors to come write the book, I was like, I think we need to have some courageous conversations around emotions and kind of share the raw, gritty, dirty, messy parts of ourselves.
Love it.
And so I would just say to you, if you're scared of having a tricky conversation, you find the courage by processing the emotion of it, by naming, what do I feel about this? What story am I making up? Is there a more powerful story I could be telling about myself here? And it's sometimes you don't even need the courage then, it just kind of dissipates. And other times you're like, oh no, I'm not going to abandon myself. I'm going to say this thing, and I'm going to say it without all of this rage energy behind it. I'm just going to say it as a matter of fact. And yeah. So subtle, but that's the difference.
I love that. Oh, I've just loved this conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, thank you for coming on. It's been really enlightening, and I know that the listeners will have got a lot from that. And if you don't, go and get the book. I'm definitely going to, because
I'm going to send you a copy, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. I would love that. I can't wait. But yeah, it's definitely get the book. If you're in a kind of a jam about your career, you know where to find Holly. And thank you for coming on and sharing your stories and your perspectives on shame. I've really enjoyed it. And listeners, if you have any questions for Holly, or you want to give us any feedback, please do. And we'll be back next week for another episode of Shameless Stories.